Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, 1 star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. This is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. Cars broke down, I missed the bus, there runs a 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right under Jumbo's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, sir, you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just the perfect day. It's just the perfect day. Na, 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 na,
Hey guys, welcome back to another great episode of Eggs. Today is a special one. It's our annual Eggy Awards show.
Yeah, that's right. For people who've stuck with us for more than just this year, we did do this last year too. It was the first inaugural edition of the Eggies last year.
Yep.
The Eggies are and have become our annual award show, where we sort of, Mike and I go back and sort of reflect on the year that's just passed, which I can't believe we're through another year already.
It's crazy.
And we basically go back, review the 50-some episodes that we do in a year, and we sort of try and, pick the best of the best in a few different categories. So this year, the way that the show is broken down, we've got 5 different categories and then a 6th, I guess, that's sort of the best of show. In each of these 5 categories, we had 3 nominees, all of which were announced on the Aggies preview show last week. However, we'll give you just sort of a top level, who they are this time. But do go back, check out some of these past episodes and stuff. These are all great shows, and not to discount any of the other 40-some guests who weren't called out. We had an amazing year with a lot of amazing talent who were willing to share their stories and everything on the show. And we are really grateful for everybody.
Yeah, it's hard. It's so hard to get everyone kind of accolades that thank you for coming on, doing this and that, and picking the top 10 or the Eggy Awards winners is hard for us because there's so much good talent there.
Yep. So anyway, for people who didn't catch last week's episode with the preview, basically these shows or the guests who are in each of the shows that are up for consideration for an Eggy in their particular category aren't being judged necessarily on downloads or any other metric that might sort of be what you're traditionally chosen for. Each of these episodes is sort of based on the quality of the conversation, the type of information they shared with us, how it sort of gelled with us personally and as hosts, how the show went. So we're trying to pick our favorites objectively, not just sort of picking the guy that got the most downloads or whatever. And so, not to say that's necessarily a bad way, but each one of these shows means a little something to each of us. And so we're really excited with this selection.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So let's start off. The first area that we're going to offer an Eggy Award in is the art area. So that would be like graphic designers, artists, pretty much anyone in
muralists,
there.
Anybody sort of in the art space.
Yep.
So the nominees for the art category were Benny Wong, artist and designer from New York.
Yep. She was episode 119.
Yep. She was an incredible listen, and honestly, you should check out her episode. She was awesome.
It was good.
Eric F. Friedenson, or I'm probably butchering his name. I should have practiced. No, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Yeah, F. Dot.
But F. Dot's my guy, and I really like him. It was a great little flyby interview. He just happened to be in town, and we were able to work it out for a quick 45-minute chat.
Right before his flight.
Yep,
home.
So we were grateful for that. And
what is his little character that he has?
Oh, his little blobs.
Yeah,
he's got these cool little blobby guys. Check him out on like Instagram or whatever. It's just EFDOT, F. Dot. And it was a lot of fun. You'll have to check it out. Yep. And then our third and final candidate in this category for the Eggy Award in Art is Keegan Hall. Keegan Hall is a Seattle-based artist and designer. He's I mean, incredible. I've never
Yeah.
seen anybody sling lead as well as he
Yeah,
does.
he's very good with the pencil.
Yeah, he does a lot of sports illustrations, things like that, stuff to do, a lot of Seahawks work and stuff like
He's
that.
done
being
a
Seattle
mural of
guy.
the president that's in
Yeah, like at Obama's house or
Yeah.
something. Yeah, I mean, it's cool. Really cool stuff.
So-
So anyway,
Without any further delay, the winner of the art category for the 2019 Eggy Award is
Keegan Hall.
Boom Boom.
I mean, it was, to back up a little bit before that, I grew up drawing all the time, obviously, and I actually went to the University of Washington's School of Art.
Okay.
And got a degree in art. So, and got to study abroad in Italy and do lots of fun stuff on the art side there. And then upon graduation, I basically had a lot of people telling me that I wasn't that good. And, after hearing that, you're not that good, you need to get a real job, all those kind of negative thoughts and sentiments, I eventually started to believe them and got a job in the real world.
What was your real world job?
So my first job out of college, so my second love after art is sports.
Okay.
So, particularly basketball. So I went to work for the Seattle Sonics.
Oh, that had to be fun.
Yeah, it was awesome. Spent 5 years with the team. We only made the playoffs one time out of those 5 years. But yeah, just awesome experience. Really cool group of people that I worked with, and kind of went on from there. But yeah, I had no plans on going back to art at all. Just in kind of business career mode.
And I think I read something about you were maybe involved with some startups, things like that along the way early on too.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, after the Sonics left, I actually went back to grad school and got my MBA. So, after finishing my business degree there, did join a startup kind of from the very ground floor. I was employee number one, joining the founders. And we raised about $4 million and worked on this mobile app for about 3.5 years before it was ultimately acquired.
Great.
Yeah, lots of.
And that
background
company
in
was
tech marketing.
Facebook.
No? Yeah, exactly.
What was the app?
It was called Perk, PIRQ, and it's still out there. It's essentially a digital loyalty platform for small business owners and their customers.
Oh, nice. What was your role in the app development process?
I oversaw the sales team and the marketing efforts.
Okay.
So a lot of the design and messaging and partnerships. And I mean, when you're in a startup, you wear all the hats. So,
Right.
Yeah, pretty cool role to be there from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and so is your background, like, have you always been artistic? Like you say you were working marketing and advertising at the app. I mean, were you, I guess, a designer by trade, or where did you pick up these skills?
Yeah, I mean, it was really, I've just always been a very curious kid. So growing up, I obviously did a lot of art. I would buy lots of comics, as you see kind of behind me here, and I would never really read them. I would just kind of draw from them. So that's, and in addition to art, I mentioned sports, but I also kind of had that entrepreneurial bug early on where I remember my parents would bowl in a bowling league every Tuesday night. And I learned how to make these little stuffed animal bears as part of a school project. And I used to make them and then take them to the bowling alley and sell them for $1 each. So I kind of always had this in my mind, this whole business / art / trying to figure out how it could all fit together down the road. So it's all kind of evolved. Both sides kind of at different times have been kind of developing on their own. And kind of now I've been able to put both of them together.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So how does that work? So, I mean, you spend a bunch of time in sort of the business world. You have this unfortunate incident in your family and you decide to go back into art and sort of pursue art again, or maybe anew. Can you talk a little bit about how that began and like why art was the outlet for you?
Yeah. I mean, when I lost my mom, I was obviously not in a great place because I was really close with her. And a few months after her passing, I remember I was just thinking about her and my childhood and all the great memories that we had. And art was a constant reoccurring theme in many of those great memories growing up. So for whatever reason, I just sat down and drew a picture, something I hadn't done in nearly 10 years, and drew a picture of Michael Jordan, who was my favorite player of all time. And I remember I posted that online with real no expectations, but I put it on Facebook, I think. And, a bunch of friends were like, wow, I didn't even know you could draw. That's so great. Very cool. And one person asked me if I could draw a picture of Cam Chancellor for them, and they would even pay me $100. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be rich off this. And I did that and posted that picture of Cam Chancellor, and Cam saw that and then shared it with all of his followers on not only Twitter but also Instagram, and then asked me to do a piece for him. And that whole process of working with Cam was really the first opportunity for me to showcase my art to the world. And it was a pretty big stage, being able to leverage his audience at the same time.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's amazing how that the reciprocation, someone shares something and then all of a sudden you get a lot of attention from it. Has that been kind of your main source of marketing, is just Instagram and people sharing your work?
Yes, I mean, social media has just been ridiculously beneficial for me. And I think art in general plays well on Instagram's platform. Obviously, it's very visual. And then you kind of combine that with, at least my approach to using social is, I like to take people inside the creation process of my art. So they really get to see it from the very beginning, where I'm drawing the first pencil strokes.
What are you working on? You're working on one right now. I think it's with Russell Wilson and Pete, the head coach. How long have you been working on that piece? Because it seems like it's been going on for a minute now. And it's cool to see the updates. Like, I spent 4 hours on his nose today.
Yeah, this one is interesting because I don't know how many hours I put into it yet, but I estimate at the end it'll be over 100.
That's crazy.
Wow. Because it's about twice the size of what I normally do. So it's actually pretty large. And then, of course, I am just obsessed with the details. So I just can't move on to a piece of the drawing without making it really tight and crisp. Like, I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of art. And when you're far away, it looks really, really good and detailed and almost like a photo. And as you get closer to it,
pixelates and...
Yeah, it really starts to break apart, and you can see, that it is a piece of artwork after all. And I'm trying to really push the limit on that, where you can get right up to my drawing, put your nose on it, and you still can't distinguish that it's just a pencil drawing.
That's so
At
crazy.
least that's the goal.
That's
awesome.
insanity.
No, it's funny too. I draw a lot, and when I was a kid, it's funny because I did many of the same things you've described. I bought the comic books. I never read them, so my wife's always asking me, "Oh, who did whatever?" I have no idea, but I bought them all, and I have them all, and but I always bought them to draw. I had a pretty influential art teacher in like seventh grade that was a comic book artist himself as a trade. And so I got really into it for a long time. And so I used that as a way to draw. And I also was interested in sports. And so I chased down a bunch of them. And you have a picture in the little video montage that you have at the top of your website that is a drawing of Ken Griffey Jr. And I think it's either from, I remember seeing a similar photo on like the front of a Beckett magazine and also on his rookie card. And I have that same drawing, or one very similar, similar pose and everything, but it was based on sort of the same idea. Mine don't look anything like yours, but
his consists of stick figures.
At this point, I'm more of a cartoonist or an illustrator. I struggle with faces. No matter what I do, I can't get faces right. So I can do the rest, but faces kill me. I can never capture somebody's likeness very well. So, but anyway, really cool, and it's fun to hear about your journey, and it's such a. I guess it seems sort of diametrically opposed to the startup culture, or the guy that's in the startup world. So it's kind of interesting or exciting to hear about that.
Yeah, I think that the two worlds are very different, but there's also a lot of overlap too, particularly on how you approach the business side of it. I think that the art industry in general is pretty old and traditional, so that it's very ripe for disruption and kind of bringing a new model to it that maybe hasn't been done before, at least doing it a little bit differently. So it's been fun kind of, trying lots of different things, just going back to my, business days of you never know what's going to work. So you just try and test lots of things and refine and try it again and see what sticks. So I've been kind of following that same blueprint with the art world as well.
So
Well,
what?
Yeah. So how much of your day, or how much credence do you pay to sort of the old way? I saw that you're being shown in some galleries and things, and versus using modern technology like Instagram and things for exposure. I mean, what are you finding are the most prolific routes for selling artwork these days?
I found that I think that the traditional model is very much gallery driven. So if you're an artist and you want to kind of make it in this world, you have to get in a gallery. That's the only way to sell original works. And I think very much of the traditional industry, at least because I came up through art school, right? And that was always the mindset there too. That's just how it is. So I remember when I first got into the gallery, they typically want you to sign an exclusive representation agreement where, even if your artwork sells, even if you sell your own artwork, they still get half of the commission, stuff
crap.
like that. And that's just what every artist signs, right? That's just an industry standard. And I wouldn't sign that, because that's not how I operated. And luckily I found a gallery that was willing to work with me on that. So if I brought my own buyer to the table, I would just sell my own work and, obviously keep the full amount.
Right.
So, but yeah, some of those little small things like that have been interesting to see how it works out. And also the idea that you can't sell original artwork unless people see it in person, which obviously reinforces that gallery mentality.
Sure.
And I found that not to be true as well, where I've been able to really showcase work online on Instagram. People have enjoyed it and, have purchased it thereafter.
So are you seeing a lot of results from like the crowdfunding type sources? Are you able to do like Indiegogo type campaigns or, something similar to that effect as you're designing the product and sell pre-releases?
I haven't done any of those traditional crowd source funding options. Maybe that would be interesting to test. But I have started pre-selling work as just a way of, getting some early revenue in the door. So even this piece now, like it's available right now for pre-sale, and people, have kind of reserved their copies, so to speak. So that might be an interesting model. Although interestingly, a lot of my artwork is charity driven. So I do fundraising, but it's not on any of those platforms. And they obviously donate all that money.
What's like your go-to charity? Like what do you focus on?
I literally work with hundreds of charities. I don't have like a single one. So I really want to partner with them and what they're doing and see how I can help what they're already doing versus trying to build my own. Like my wife is always like, you should start your own nonprofit. And, it's a whole nother animal when you get into running your own show there. So I would prefer to partner with them. But I think in the last few years, I think we're well over $400,000 raised.
Yeah, I think you said it's 406 on your website, which is quite a bunch of money, actually. I mean, congratulations on that.
That's amazing.
So
yeah, thank you. And that really goes back to, I don't know if you kind of checked out my very first one, how that all came about. But my whole journey back into art is just ridiculous.
Well, that's what I was going to say, actually. Maybe let's take a little bit of a step backwards. We kind of, got off the path a little bit, and maybe let's talk a little bit more linearly about that. You made the step to get back into art and sort of how you were able to get that going. I think that part of the story is really key.
Yeah, again, it was nothing was really planned out early on. I had that opportunity with Cam Chancellor, which was amazing. And he's just a good dude. I've gotten to know him pretty well since then, and just a really, really great guy. But as I started to get back into just drawing in general and starting to see like a genuine enjoyment and appreciation for my work, I had this thought in the back of my mind really from the beginning of how can I use this to help other people? Like what options are there? And, of course you can do an original drawing and donate to that to, a charity of some kind, and they'll auction it off. And, it's kind of like one drawing, one donation. And that's kind of the model that I've seen in the past. But so I came up with this idea where if I could do a really cool drawing and team up with an athlete, and then we make prints. And I don't know where I'd come up with this idea of 200 prints, but 200 prints for $200 each was the idea. And the goal was to raise money for basically kids that were similar to me growing up. So I grew up in a a pretty poor environment. I lived in a trailer park for the majority of my life, and finally moved into a real house once I got into high school. And then I have one sister who is handicapped. She has cerebral palsy, so that was kind of my childhood.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was tough, but I mean, I think when you don't know what you don't know, so I just thought that's how it was for everybody. But looking back, I think there's a lot of kids currently that were in the same situation I was. So if I could give back with my art to help them, that's what I wanted to do. And again, had this idea and just randomly reached out to Richard Sherman on Twitter. Again, no introductions from anybody, but just like tweeted at him saying, "Hey, I have this charity idea, and can I DM you my idea?" And he actually replied and was like, "Yeah." So I DM'd him my idea, 200 for 200, and he was like, "That's awesome, let's do it." And I was like, "Wow, okay, here we go." And I remember as it all kind of came together, we finally announced the fundraiser on a Monday, and the on sale date was going to be the Friday, a few days away. So we had that whole week to kind of promote it, and it just kind of blew up, not only across social media, but it made its way into news and even international news. And so once Friday rolled around, they sold out instantly. So we raised $40,000 on the first day, and then donated 100% of it. So
That's
it was
amazing.
pretty cool.
So big shout out to Keegan. Once again, just to sort of reiterate, I mean, we had Keegan on the show. He was a great blend of not just art, but business and sort of the business of art.
And philanthropy.
Yeah, tons of philanthropy. He's raised nearly $500,000 for different charities, using his artwork as a means to generate income for people.
Yep.
I think his story is really inspirational. I also think just the quality of his work and everything else. He's just a real stand-up guy.
Yep.
So we're grateful to have him on. Tip of the cap to both Benny and F. Dot. You guys were awesome, also, and pleased to have included you in this category. So congratulations, Keenan Hall, on the Eggy Award in the art category.
Yep.
So next on the list, we've got the music category. For people who listen to the show, you guys know that music is something that's important to both Mike and I. It's a big part of our lives and has been for bazillion years.
Yeah, as long as we've known each other, that's for sure.
Well, basically, we met each other through music, to be perfectly honest. So, I mean, it's a story for another day, but nonetheless, I mean, it's a big deal for us. So we're excited to have this category on the show. I guess to sort of just dive right in, the candidates for the Eggy Award in the music category are
Chase Loader.
Chase Loader, DJ Chase.
Chase 1-2. Yeah.
Is a Salt Lake City-based DJ. He has since become kind of a good buddy of Mike's.
Yep.
But he was willing to come on here. If I recall the way it went down, I think it was kind of a short notice thing. We had a guest flake or something.
I can't remember the exact reasoning.
Yeah, there was some reason that he squoze us in, and so I was really grateful for him being willing to do that.
Yep.
Also, ended up being a great interview. Lots of sort of old school Salt Lake City knowledge. It was really cool. We had a lot of interesting stuff to talk about.
Yeah, and like Ryan said, over the course of the year, he's become a really good friend of mine, and I'm glad we made that acquaintance early on.
Yep. Yeah, he's been great. So second guest is, or second nominee is Rico Estrada. And it's not the guy from Chips. We learned that in the interview. So apparently that's Eric Estrada, but Rico has a wonderful mustache that is very reminiscent. Rico is kind of an interesting story too. For people who listened to the Eggy Awards last year, we had a category for the longest episode of all time, which was proudly held up by my friend John Edney, or Johnny Necro of OPM.
I don't think we're going to beat that one anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think so either. God, we'll just die of old age.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it was riveting conversation. It was really cool. And so, but basically, we had a 4-hour episode with Johnny. It was broken over 2 episodes, 2-hour episodes, if you can imagine. And
it's worth the listen. Go listen to it if you haven't.
So cool. Lots of cool old rock stories and stuff. It's really cool. So,
but he won last year, so we couldn't put him on this one.
Couldn't throw him in this one. However, so Rico, basically at the midway point, 2 hours into our conversation, Johnny had to split and go get his daughter. And at that time, he introduced us to Rico, who was a singer in a band there in San Diego, also, or in Los Angeles,
Yeah,
also.
Johnny was producing their album at the time.
Yeah, and so Rico was kind enough to come on the show, and so we just did kind of a quick impromptu interview with him, and it was great. It didn't actually air at the time that we recorded it, so it actually ended up coming out this year, even though we'd recorded Johnny about a year prior, or 6 months prior.
That one is episode 89.
Yep, you'll have to give it a listen. It's a lot of fun too. Just kind of a quick impromptu get to know you sesh with a guy that we hadn't planned to talk to, so it was a lot of fun.
And
Third and final is
Michael Johnston, the lead singer of Small Town Poets.
Yep. Also songwriter, really established guy in that space. I mean, everybody in that sort of genre of music knows who he is.
Mm-hmm.
He's really well connected guy and really just a great conversationalist. Like as I recall the conversation, he was really easy to talk to. He had a lot of cool old stories about life on the road, and it was a lot of fun to hang out with him and get to know him. So really strong category. This is really cool. So, but there can only be one winner.
And who is it?
In this, for the winner for the Eggy Award in the music category is Michael Johnston.
So were you guys the typical, get the Sprinter van? Well, actually, that's nice for...
Yeah, that's nice these days.
Get the Ford Econoline with the trailer going from city to city, or were they actually flying you out and kind of backlining your gear for you?
Yeah, we definitely had those days of the van. But at this point, we had gotten... we did for a few years. We had a bus. It was an older Eagle, a tour. It was set up for touring, the bunks and stuff like that. But we found this vehicle that I've only seen one other like it, and it was a van front, but it was kind of like the airport shuttle chassis or shell.
Uh-huh.
It had never been. It had been. Built to be a small touring vehicle. So we just found it on a lot in Georgia that it was just a bizarre thing. It was exactly what we want, what we had pictured in our minds, but didn't know existed. And then I walked over this lot because seeing it from the highway, I was like, this is the vehicle of our dreams. So it was easier to drive than a bus, but bigger than a van. So it has 6 bunks in it, and then a little lounge space. So yeah, you didn't ask for the details, but we had something that we could drive ourselves, or we could hire someone to drive if it was a long touring situation. So for that tour, yeah, we were driving city to city. There were, when we were off of a tour, whether it was when we were headlining or when we were supporting on, we would often do weekend dates that were fly dates. So we've done a little bit of both of those things, and they both have their ups and downs.
Ups and downs, yeah. If you could go back and pick 1 or 2 stories from the road, do you have any that stand out that are just, oh my goodness, I got to tell this story?
Well, 2 of them involve that vehicle. Someone, I guess it was the booking agent. And I guess that's just where the opportunities were. But it seemed like this one particular year we had gotten the timing off, because we were touring in the northern part of the United States in the coldest months, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, gosh, what were we thinking? And I remember we were waking up one morning, because we would often drive through the night. Since we had bunks, we would often drive through the night. And I remember waking up, and one of the first things that you would do as you're waking up in your bunk is to go, okay, are we moving or are we still? And then you play this game, are we at a truck stop? You just kind of guess where we are before you pull the curtain back and step out of your bunk. And so I could tell we were stopped, and I just heard this noise. I was like, gosh, what is that? That's a weird sound. Sounds a little bit like a saw. So the great thing about this vehicle is that the bunk room had a door, and there were, when you closed that door, there was no daylight getting in.
Nice.
You had no idea what time of day it was unless you had a clock handy or whatever. So open up the door, blasted by sunlight. But I could see through the window of the vehicle that we're in a parking lot of the department store, I don't know, Walmart or something like that, just to tell we were in a parking lot. And what had happened is the driver had been pulling into this parking lot to just rest for a little bit, and didn't realize there was ice on the road, and sort of hit a patch of ice, went up onto like a little median, and had run over a small tree.
You slept through all of it.
Through all of it. And so the manager of the store was out there with a saw cutting the tree their vehicle. That was the squeaking sound that I was hearing. And one a little bit scarier, but similar is it wasn't the same run, but it was probably a similar part of the country. We were traveling one night, and we had no business being out on the road. Honestly, I don't think we knew that.
Oh, you're
time.
young and dumb at the time, right?
We didn't make a decision to drive out into a blizzard, but nonetheless, we were driving out into a blizzard, and a similar kind of thing where I woke up, and it was strangely quiet, because usually, even if we were stopped, the generator was still going. So vehicles like that tend to have a generator that
AC and
electricity for your air conditioning, and your lounge area, TVs and stuff. But it was just stark quiet, and then it sounded like I was hearing echoes, like you would hear if you're inside of a room, right? I was like,
"What is going on?
That's weird. That's not even possible. How could that be?" So again, I open up the door to the bunk room and walk out, and sure enough, through the windshield of the vehicle, we're inside of a garage. And you can imagine the questions that I have.
Yeah, that's an awesome thing to be greeted with when you get out of bed.
And so what happened was that our driver, we were on the interstates, kind of going at highway speeds. It was a lot of snowfall, but a lot of vehicles were out. But apparently he was going around a tractor trailer, and just the draft of the combination of the wind and the draft from going around that tractor trailer shifted him kind of out of the ruts that were on the road. And he lost control and actually went down into a median on the interstate, that all the way down into the other side, came back up again, and came to a rest on the side of the road. Okay. All this happened, and he's screaming, "Oh!"
I want to know what kind of sleep medication you're on, because you're
you're a great sleeper.
None of us woke up. Besides him, there are 6-7 other guys in the vehicle. Nobody woke up, and we got pulled by a wrecker into the shop, into the garage. None of us woke up.
That's amazing.
Completely oblivious to anything that was going on.
That's awesome. And meanwhile, your poor driver has got white knuckles and white hair, losing his mind.
He had to go through some therapy before he would get around to it.
That's awesome.
Woohoo! Big shout out for Michael. Once again, really grateful to have had him on. He, is an incredible guy, and I hope he's doing well. We haven't talked to him for a minute, so I'm looking forward to pinging him again to let him know he's an award winner now. I'm sure those Grammys and everything else he might have kicking around aren't anything compared to this Eggy that he's going to get.
He's going to get an Eggy and push all the other ones off the shelf and be
that's right
front and
so
center.
But his was episode 98. So if you get a minute, go back, check him out. Also check out their music, Small Town Poets.
Yep.
Okay. Next category.
Yeah. Next on the Eggy Award category is business, and business in general.
Yeah, business is a hard category on this show because we have so many people who are sort of touch business from so many different angles. Like we had a number of CEOs and musicians and all kinds of things, people who sort of, have a connection to business, whether they run a record label or whether, they were CEO of a corporation or whatever. Like we have a really broad swath of these people. So what we did is tried to narrow it down to sort of 3 separate and distinct groups, but sort of under the umbrella of business. And I think we came up with some pretty good options. Obviously, there were lots of other guests that could have been slotted right in here too. We had a lot of really great ones this year.
Yep.
But nonetheless, we had to whittle it down to a few. So those few
first on the list is Frank Cottle, and he is the CEO and founder of Alliance Virtual Offices. He's based out of LA, and it was just a really awesome conversation with him. He's very savvy in the business world. I think his dad was a business investor as well. Just really knowledgeable and a really good conversation.
Yeah, really great. And I mean, our conversation with him spanned everything from remote work to virtual offices to co-working to yachting, for God's sake. I mean, we talked about everything with him. And Frank was just, I mean, he was a great guy, fielded a lot of really cool questions. And I think there were a lot of actionable stuff in there. Right? Really strong episode this year, episode 93. Next in the list is
Chris Wallace.
So Chris, he came on kind of more recently. He wasn't as early in the year as Frank was, but Chris was, I mean, you know, he's basically a marketer. He runs a marketing company out of New Jersey, I believe. And, you know, he's got a really great rap on sort of the importance of brand in your sort of business culture and all that stuff. And I think he was really good. He was a real sport, you know, answered a lot of great questions for us here on the show, but then also, I mean, after the fact, I mean, he was still posting and bragging about his appearance on the show for weeks and weeks. And so we're really grateful for all that.
Yeah.
Great interview, great conversation. And
if you want to hear it,
in this list.
it's on 122.
Yep, episode 122. Yep. So third and final candidate, or no, I'm doing that again. Candidate. Third and final nominee in this category.
Isn't it kind of the same thing?
Yeah, it is. But like, you know, like if you watch the Oscars or whatever, they're nominees. They're not candidates.
Okay.
Yeah, no, candidates are, you know, I don't know. Maybe it is.
Running for president.
Yeah,
candidates.
those are candidates.
Yeah.
We're talking nominees
because we're nominating them
That's
for
right.
the award. Okay.
So our third and final nominee in the business category is Stormy Simon. Stormy is a past president of Overstock.com. She is a cannabis activist.
She runs a company called Canna Kids.
Yep. She's really an interesting woman. She's had a very interesting past. Her conversation or our interview with her was really impactful. There was a lot of great information about sort of just the trials and tribulations of coming up as a woman in you know, high level management in the time period she did.
Yep.
Some of the struggles she had to overcome, her move into cannabis advocacy and everything. It was really an interesting conversation. You'll want to check it out. She was episode number 104.
Yep.
So the winner of the Eggy in the business category is none other than
Mr. Frank Cottle.
So I grew up in an entrepreneurial family with a serial entrepreneur dad who had built a number of companies quite successfully. And so when it came time for me to create a career, the concept of working for someone else instead of with someone else or with a team or on my own, which I've always kind of been sort of a lone wolf, I couldn't understand it. I always felt that college education, at least that I had, was always teaching you to go to work for IBM or something.
Yeah.
And that just didn't work for me. For me, college was a time when you have to learn how to make decisions. And if you can do that one thing, learn how to make decisions well, then your time spent in school was well worthwhile.
Now, you shared a story on another podcast that I checked out yesterday about your dad and commodities and Ship It. Can you talk about that?
We're in the food production distribution business, and we had cold storage facilities in Los Angeles, amongst other things. And my dad would speculate in the commodities market primarily with fresh foods or frozen foods, fryers, roasters, pork bellies, things of that nature. And whenever he would go one way in the market, he'd buy something short. Well, then if it turned long, he would just say, ship it. And it always threw people off. They'd say, wait a second, we're talking like the 10 carloads of pork belly. Carloads being a 160,000 pound freezer container in a train car. And he'd say, yeah. So And then he'd just sit on it until the market turned again.
And then he'd sell it himself.
Then he'd sell it himself, right? And we were fortunate in that we had large institutional customers for the company, the school systems, prison systems, U.S. Army, big tour cruise lines and things of that
Oh, wow.
nature. So the volume, it was a low margin but high volume business.
There you go.
And we worked in, quarter of a cent, half cent a pound increments for margin sometimes.
Oh, wow.
But in the millions of pounds. So
So it works out.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, so let's get back to your story a little bit and just talk about the move from yachting and all this fun entrepreneurial stuff that you were doing and all the lessons you learned. And kind of you began to transition into this world of executive offices and things like that. Can you just talk about kind of that move? Because they don't seem super related outside of just being entrepreneurial.
Well, actually, when I was in the yachting business, I'm here from Newport Beach, and a lot of people in Newport Beach at the time, a lot of my clients were in residential and commercial real estate development. And I looked at that business, and we started actually in the mid 70s in residential apartment buildings. Buying apartments, refurbishing the complexes, and then sitting on them and flipping them really.
Okay.
And spinning up into larger projects and larger projects. And I found, honestly, that I didn't like that business. It was too management intensive on little things. It was really kind of painful. Even though we were fairly large and had a management company and everything, I wasn't out necessarily fixing toilets or anything like that, but it was a pretty good business. And I just decided to move over to the commercial side as an investment, and then got intrigued with the concepts of shared workspace, executive suites, land banking, things of that nature, and decided that I had sailed and hung out on the yachting scene long enough, and that it was time for me, as my dad said, it was time for me to put my long pants on. Which was kind of interesting considering at the time we had the largest yacht brokerage in the world.
Right.
So that was pretty long pants business.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that seems like pretty long pants to me.
But for him, it was nope. You're still playing on boats.
Right.
So we started in call it 1980 with a land banking theory of buying property, buying a piece of dirt on the edge of a large commercial development with additional entitlement. Meaning, if we we planned to put up a 50,000 foot building, we had the right with the land to build 500,000 feet.
Wow.
And the key to that kind of a theory is always, well, how do you afford to buy the land, hold on to it for the 6 or 8 or 10 years that it takes for the location to mature to where it's time to build a larger building on it? And we discovered these funny little things called executive suites, which back in the late 70s, early 80s were brand new. And we determined that we could generate the most amount of revenue with the smallest amount of bricks and mortar to sit on the biggest piece of land with the greatest entitlement that we could hold for 10 years by building buildings that had executive suites. We're focused on executive suites.
Okay.
So between 1980 and 1990, we built a portfolio across California, Arizona, and Texas of those kind of buildings.
So didn't you do something like you would build one every 110 days? And then you'd flip it, and you did that for 10 years?
Yes, for 10 years we did it, but we didn't flip the buildings real quick. We held on to the buildings as long as possible and really sold the portfolio at the end of the 10-year period.
Okay.
We were going through quite a development phase, and it was quite interesting. And it was also quite exhausting, because we built across California, Arizona, and Texas. So there's a lot of moving parts there.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's pretty cool though. And, I mean, based on the time frame you're talking about, I think that was pretty innovative thing to be doing. It's becoming more and more commonplace, this idea of co-working and renting an executive suite and things like that. But I mean, it really seems like you're on the cutting edge of that kind of idea.
Well, actually, at times the bleeding edge. I think.
Yeah.
The cutting edge is always a little bit bloody, and we learned a lot. We made some terrible mistakes in our first 4 or 5 years. We way overdeveloped the properties, particularly in terms of technology. I'm looking at your guys' video images, and I'll ask you, where were you in 1980?
Right.
It's just a bouncing baby boy in 1980.
Yeah, in 1980, PCs didn't exist. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's interesting just how far things have come.
In our centers, we put together in the first year a joint venture with Bell Labs to basically have the first business facility that simultaneously transmitted both voice and data over 4-pair twisted cable. We built a custom, what was called then a MUX box, which was what you'd call today a router, that joined voice and data, and we put in big digital switches and big mini computers, and we put touchscreen terminals on every desk that was interconnected with the central service core. So things that were way beyond people's understanding of even how to use.
Yeah.
We were the first commercial installation of ISDN in a joint venture with GTE. They're smart part concepts. So we've always pushed technology as part of our business model, and sometimes way too far in advance, where we had to explain to everyone, hey, look, this is how it really works. I mean, people were using telexes back then. and here we had touchscreen technologies and
well, yeah, no, that's it.
Data.
I mean, it really is, how amazing things are. I mean, nowadays when you're looking for co-working space, like great Wi-Fi is about all anybody will promise you. But from just the the little laptop computer, like in our case, we're running multiple cameras, multiple audio setups. We're running all this stuff off of just a couple little machines. We've got 10 times the technology packed into this laptop. Yet you guys were doing this, 30 years ago.
40 years ago.
40 years ago, I guess.
40 years
yeah, that's
ago.
right. I turned 39 next month. So yeah, no, I'm acutely aware.
So you were just a twinkle in your parents' eye at that
yes,
time.
but acutely aware of 40 years ago, all of a sudden.
But it was really fun, and always being on this leading edge of the combination of technology and developing the concepts. Today, our industry combines people, place, and technology, sprinkles in the concept of community, and delivers the entire bundled package with a highly flexible service agreement. And if you look at what all businesses need today, it'd be easy to say all businesses need clients, all businesses need access to capital, growth, and sustenance, and all businesses need flexibility because of the various economic cycles that we go through year after year, decade after decade. And so by bringing flexibility to the workplace very early on and combining it with the things that in a bundled package that all businesses have to have, but most small businesses in particular aren't prepared to manage people, as a good example.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any clerical, secretarial, administrative support sitting around you guys.
No. No.
Okay.
We could use some,
it's painful.
but we don't have it.
It's painful. Hiring, firing, interviewing, maintaining, worrying about sick leave, vacations, benefits. These things take a lot away from the entrepreneurs to focus on their core business.
Yeah, no, it's true.
So-
I mean, to that point, like right now we're in the process of trying to hire like a personal assistant, executive assistant for my ad agency. And the amount of time and resources I'm having to spend just trying to find the right candidate versus, what I should be doing, in terms of business, new business or whatever. It's amazing. And, I mean, we're just a smallish firm, so we don't do a ton of hiring. And so we're not like pros at it. It's a little here, a little there kind of thing.
Let's use this as a segue over to virtual officing and flexibility for a second.
Great.
Let's assume that you guys were going to start your company and you needed to go to a VC and raise $1 million. And I was going to start my company and I needed to go to a VC and raise $1 million. And when I walked in, I said to the VC, hey, I need $1 million. I'm going to do this amazing stuff. And you say, well, what are you going to do with that $1 million? I'd say, well, I'm going to go out and get an office. I'm going to hire a PA and I've got to buy some photocopy imaging equipment. And I need a phone system and I've got to put in a computer network, blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on and on. So he looked at me and he says, okay. And then I said, after that, I'm going to hire some engineers and build some cool stuff. And you walk in, the same VC, and say, hey, we're starting this really great marketing company. We need $1 million. He says, what are you going to do? He says, oh, I'm going to move into a co-working center and hire some engineers. Who's going to get the money? You or me?
Yeah, right. It sure seems like the safer bet to go with the
You're going to get the
person
money. One of our primary groups that we interact with are venture capitalists, seed investors, et cetera, that come to us to help house and host, almost in an incubator or accelerator type capacity, the companies that they invest in, because the business model gives flexibility, reduces cost, reduces capex, and also allows the entrepreneur to focus on their core business model.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, they're not caught up in building out a space or any of this other stuff, and the amount of money that goes into doing all that work.
Right,
They're
exactly.
just down to brass tacks. They're getting right to it.
Okay. Up next on the Eggy Awards show, our next category is motivators. And by motivators, we're talking about people who are just out to motivate people to be better. And we've had quite a few of them.
This was a really tough category for us to fill, not because of, lack of talent or lack of people to put in it, but because we had so many. This category sort of includes people that range from like business coach to people who've had sort of, rags to riches or top to bottom of life kind of stories. Basically they're all people whose sort of main purpose is to sort of help elevate other people's game based on something in their life. And so this is a really hard category to fill, even harder to narrow down. But I think we've landed on a few great ones.
Yeah.
So the nominees in the motivators category for the 2019 Eggy Award is...
First is Carrie Murphy. She's episode 109.
Carrie Murphy is the CEO of Inspired Living TV. She is a former model who eventually bought her modeling agency and grew that company to be rather successful. She now does coaching and helps inspire people to be better versions of themselves, basically. She teaches them how to go on camera and get out in front of, and how to perform on stage and how to perform on camera so that you can become a better speaker or orator or business guy or whatever it is you want to do that you might need to do in public. She helps people overcome things like stage fright, things like that. She had a really inspiring story, really interesting person. And actually that episode for me is sort of near and dear to my heart, just in that for me, I felt like we sort of turned a corner on her episode. I think that, the longer the show goes on and the more work we put into the show, the better our interviews have become and the better our guests have become and everything. And, well, I shouldn't even say the better our guests have become, but the more able we have been to get good things out of our guests. And with Carrie's episode in particular, that interview just went so slick and so smooth, and
he's still patting himself on the back.
Yeah, I really do. And so, but I feel like for me anyway, I kind of turned a corner on that episode. So if you haven't already, go back and take a listen to it at episode 109.
Yep, it's a good one.
Our second nominee in this category of motivators is Michael G. Dash.
Michael is a author. He wrote a book called Chasing the High. But he's also a motivational speaker, and we had him in studio. He came in, he was doing a book signing tour, and we caught him while he was coming through Salt Lake. And the interview was great. His backstory is amazing. Just all in all, a good person.
Yeah, Michael was fantastic. I mean, he was literally... one of my favorite shows of the year. I mean, having him across from the table telling us, his sort of struggles with gambling addiction and drugs and Wolf of Wall Street type kind of things and all this stuff, going from like this high level broker to just like bottom of the bottom, was really inspirational story. Hearing about how he overcame all that. And now he shares this information with people that are locked up in prison and all kinds of stuff. He shares his story, and it's really great. His book's amazing, and he's an amazing guy. So I'm pleased to have him on this list.
Yep. And last but not least, in the motivator category, we have Josh Stamley.
Josh is a great one too. He's been really impactful for me personally as well. I'm hearing a lot of me. Mike doesn't get impressed by anyone. He's too cool.
No, I really enjoyed Josh's interview. It was
Josh came on. Basically, he was a marketer, and so I think that's part of the thing. Is I do marketing as well. So for me, it was particularly interesting. But Josh he's a really great guy, really nice guy. I've come to know him a little better since having been on the show, and he's a very liberal and generous with his time. He's always happy to help and raise a hand. He began life as I guess didn't begin life, but I mean, he had an agency that was floundering, and he was working a lot for not a lot of money and struggling, and basically stumbled into writing, becoming a writer. He had been blogging for a lot of years, and he had a friend in the PR game that was able to connect him to a larger publication and get them to feature one of his articles.
Oh yeah, wasn't it like the New York Times or something?
Yeah, I think it was maybe the Post or something. I can't remember. But after a few episodes or a few articles, he ended up getting a big one that landed in Forbes that basically directly accounted for about $5 million in income.
Wow.
And so for him it was a game changer. And for anybody it would be. And so he's a really interesting guy. He sort of talks about this story about becoming a writer, a content provider, and a thought leader. And I think he's got a lot of great things to share. So also pleased to have him on this list of motivators.
All right. So in the category of motivators for 2019 Eggy Awards, who is the winner?
The winner is, and this was a tough one, but couldn't go to a more deserving guy. This one goes to Michael G. Dash.
Yep.
It's so interesting. Maybe it wasn't as much then as it is now, but it seems like this kind of stuff is all over now. Just in 2019, those sorts of things, there's a lot more, I guess, acceptance of those ideas, these different, work-life balance and meditation and, self, love and things like that. And I don't know how many years ago this was when you discovered that. 4 years ago. So, we're probably getting into this sort of world that we're in. But even at that, there's still stigma attached to being that guy. Did you have any problem embracing that in your life and having it just be part of your new persona? Or like, how did you make the shift from guy who was formerly one way to now guy who's enlightened?
I just don't give a shit.
Oh, well, that would be that New Yorker.
That would do it, right?
As many of these things as I might adapt, like you're never going to take the East Coast out of me,
sure.
Right? Look, there's some friends of mine that like will never understand, right? But they don't need to understand. They're,
it's not about them. It's about
not
you.
about them.
It was
right?
the right solution for you at the right time.
Right. And like the goal in life is to evolve. It's not to stay in the same spot all the time. Right. And as you evolve, then your interests should evolve as well. I have a chapter in the book called The Habit of Habit Making. And it's really important that we have habits, good habits, but that as we evolve, that we change our habits. So they fit, like the habits I had 5 years ago don't fit me now. Mm-hmm. Right. And the way that I consistently do that is to tap in to what I call the power of curiosity. And I think it's one of the most underrated things, because as children, we're very curious about everything. But then as we fall into our routines in life, we're going to work, we got the family, we got this, we got that. It's like kind of monotonous in a lot of respects. And we lose that curiosity factor. So tapping into our curiosity, trying out new activities that we've never tried before. Even if we heard it from somebody else, so what? It didn't work for them. Not everything is going to resonate with everyone. Right. So it's about trying different things out and adopting and integrating into your life what works best for you. So a great example for me is like sound baths. I don't know if you're familiar with the sound bath. If you've ever heard of sound bath. I discovered sound baths in Utah, not in Bali, not in California.
The place you would think you'd find
good old Salt Lake City, Utah. Okay, and basically it's people, and it's also referred to as sound healing and sound bowl therapy. So like there's people who play these sound bowls. They're big bowls, right? They're thousands of dollars, and they have this device, and they make sounds by taking this device. It's like a thick,
sort of like somebody
drumstick.
that plays a glass with like a wet finger or something. It's sort of that same kind of resonant sound, right?
Huh.
Exactly. But there's multiple bowls, different sizes, make different noises, and some other instruments. And you're laying down, okay, as if you're meditating, laying down for an hour, and they take you through this sound journey. And it's the most relaxing thing ever. You can release all your stress, and actually when I'm in it, I feel like I'm high and I haven't taken a drug. And that is the best part of it. And
Well, I've heard that with meditation, that you could actually get to a flow state, and it feels like you're permanently high. Same kind of thing. Like you're just kind of in that realm. And with the sound thing, I'm almost wondering if it's like resonant frequencies, like if it's just certain pitches or
Yeah, I think that's more or less what it is. It is. It's that really harmonic sounds and stuff.
Yep.
It almost puts you in like a trance-like state.
exactly.
And I haven't done it outside to say I've done like a little bit of some meditation things, some different meditation like tapes and things, and the tapes will sometimes do this sound in the background or whatever, or like in a yoga class, they'll run that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I mean, yeah, it always knocks me out. I feel horrible for the people in the room with me though, because I always like start snoring. And I just,
you're the snorer.
Yeah, everybody's
You're that
trying to
guy.
I'm like,
relax.
I'm trying to enjoy the music, and then there's,
Yeah, I ruin it for everybody. So
I'm like,
so-
is somebody gonna nudge that guy?
Someone kick him real quick.
yeah, no, I had to start taking the yoga class with the old ladies because all the old ladies snore too, so it works out. Well, that's awesome. Well, I think a lot of times it's a matter of finding the right thing for you, whatever that may be. So in this case, you found your way to Bali, and then you found later the sound journeys and things like that. But I mean, that's what it took for you in that moment to make the change that you needed to make in your life. And for other people, it could be something else. Maybe they get a puppy or whatever, But I mean, effectively, it's the same thing, and it's converting the way you think. It's getting rid of those, thoughts and things that control you or keep you from advancing or moving forward in your life. And so being able to find something like that actually you could use as a tool to move yourself forward is really interesting. It's awesome. So, and I'm grateful you found it. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, it started with the flow stuff. And then the flow opened up my mind to, all right, I'm going to go to this sound bath. And you know what? I don't need to tell anybody about it. I'm going to go because if, at that point, if you have a lot of us carry around this big ego, we don't want our friends making fun of us or whatever. And, I try it out and then I'm like, wow, this is great. And then I find some other people who enjoy it and then slowly integrate things into your life. Like I like to say the smallest change can have the biggest impact. So like just trying something new and getting out of your comfort zone. It doesn't mean you have to do it the rest of your life. It doesn't mean it will resonate with you, but it might.
Yeah.
And the only way to kind of grow and evolve is to tap into that curiosity, turn that into action, and then that action can turn into connection. And that's where the magic happens, when you can get connected to people, over things that you really enjoy. And, maybe it is, you talked about getting a dog. Maybe you get a dog, then you're going to the dog park. All of a sudden you're talking to all these new people who have dogs and everything, and you're all of a sudden interested in this whole other thing, But for me, it's about though you do, and you mentioned it before, and again, people might think it's shishi or whatever, but you cannot be present for other people unless you're present for yourself, and unless you treat yourself well and make sure you find time for yourself. This notion that nobody has time is complete bullshit. Everybody's got time. It's just a matter of how you allocate it. Yeah. And if you take time for yourself, and you got to love yourself. It might sound corny or whatever, but if you can't love yourself, how are you going to be a great leader at your company? How are you going to love your family? How are you going to be optimal in those areas? How are you going to be a great friend if at the end of the day you really don't love yourself?
Yeah.
And I never believed that for 30 plus years of my life, but I believe it now.
Yeah. No, I think, and I think you mentioned, and you're talking about like kind of this interesting subject that I don't think a lot of people get into. And you mentioned it, it's been a minute, so I'll just kind of go back a few minutes. But it was this idea of change or evolution. I think that, you see so many of these sort of aspirational videos and things on YouTube and whatever, all these, Tony Robbins types or whatever, trying to push you to your limit or whatever. And so many of us resist all that stuff. Like we're all looking, but we never do. And I think that, sort of being able to, I guess, allow yourself to do something and get through that little social barrier or whatever it is. You don't want to look stupid in front of your friends, or, you don't want to be perceived as now the guy that's the yoga master or whatever, I think that little moment, whatever that is such a tremendous hurdle for people. In your case, maybe you were forced a little bit into making that choice sort of by your condition and everything else, but how would you encourage people to sort of fight through that
invisible barrier, the thing that keeps you from doing what it is you want. Like you might watch the videos, you might do all the learning on YouTube, you might do all this and that, but you never actually make the move. You get very Gary Vaynerchuk screaming in your ear all day, but you never actually do what he says. What do you think it is that sort of might help somebody make that step?
Well, the first thing is don't be so hard on yourself, right? Everybody's ready at a different time. But what harm is it in exploring something new? Mm-hmm. What harm is it in acting on something? You have to take that first step.
Yeah.
It all sounds nice and good and she and blah, 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 but you have to take that first step. And that first step can be different for a lot of people. Like for somebody, it could be going to a meditation for the first time. It could be taking a hike in the mountains, right? Mm-hmm. Getting out of the house, getting out in the environment. And like the environment can, like I just recently moved to California to be close to the ocean.
Sure, yeah. Proximity to beach, man.
I love the ocean is tranquil for me. Mm-hmm. It calms me down. It's peaceful. Getting outside every day and going to the ocean changes my entire mood. Yeah. So you have to be in the right mindset to do that. But if you're, isolating yourself and you have no connection with other people, then you're never going to get there. So like I really advise, like what worked for me is finding my tribes. I think it's really important that people find their tribes, okay? And what I mean by that is, I went to Bali and I found this group of people in unconventional life. But before that, I was part of this entrepreneurial tribe called YEC. It's called Young Entrepreneurial Council. It's like for 40 and under, doing over $1 million in revenue, right? And there are and I was an entrepreneur. So it was great for me because when I had entrepreneurial challenges, I had nobody to lean on before. But now I have all these other entrepreneurs who are part of this group that understand the pressures that we deal with every day, that when your girlfriend, your spouse, your husband, like they might not understand it because they're in a different world, right? So it's important to have people close to you that can relate to you, and you can kind of speak to about certain things. And I believe that, I have many tribes, and that's really what's allowed me to be fulfilled. Because like if there's an entrepreneur issue, I have an issue running a business, I can lean on those people. If I want to go and work out at the gym, I have all these people at the gym who know me, who I can work out at the gym. If I want to go travel, I know a bunch of people who enjoy traveling, and we can bond over traveling. Yeah. And it's on and on and on. The sound bath thing, right? So hiking. It could be a hiking group. It could be a dog walking group. I mean, it could be anything. You can go on meetup.com and you could find groups that share the same interests as you. And then it's a lot easier for you to go and do something because then you have connection.
Common conversation, talking points, all that stuff.
Exactly. And you can slowly integrate yourself into taking action. If you don't want to take that step immediately of going and trying a sound bath because you feel weird about it. Sure. The bottom line is, though, it's your life. Fuck what everybody else thinks.
Yeah. I kind of love that because I think it's one of those things that people... I mean, I see so many people that keep doing the wrong things all the time, even if it's to their own self-detriment. They do it just because that's who they are. They've always been that person, so they're going to stay that person, and that is what they are. And it is exactly what you said. It's, they're too busy wrapped up in what everybody perceives them as, so they stay that person or stay stagnant, even though they really could be exploring all these other avenues. And, I even experience that a lot in my own life, like I'm sort of known for one thing, but I have all these other interests that I won't chase down because, I'm kind of this guy, and so I think it's worth noting. And I don't know that I can give anything so profound as to help anybody get through that on their own. I mean, it's like you said, you kind of find it when you need it and when you're ready. Like, there is no time. You're not going to hit it at 38 and a half. It might be at 40 or it could be at 29. It could be, whenever whenever you need to find it. I always say that it took a whole lifetime of decisions to get to sitting here at this table with you. This didn't happen in the last week or the last month making this work. It literally took 39 years of me making decisions to wind up at this table with you. And by saying that or sort of thinking about it that way, it helps me not look backwards and go, oh, God, I should have done this differently. Or, I could have met Michael 5 years ago if I'd have done this or, whatever. I mean, it allows me to not have that regret or that doubt. And I think that's, a nice way of thinking about things. Because even with you, you sort of had to experience all the adversity you faced in order to become the human you became today. Like, you wouldn't
Sure.
be this guy if you hadn't faced all that first.
Sure. I mean, I had a huge ego. I mean, nobody had a bigger ego than me. And a lot of people allow their ego to stand in the way of their fulfillment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that happens a lot, and it's unfortunate. And I mean, people probably write whole books on this.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of time people spend on the what ifs in their life. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? The amount of energy spent on that, 99% of the what ifs never happen. I went through my whole life thinking about what if this, what if that, what if this, with this lawsuit, I was like, oh, I'm going to go bankrupt. What if this? I was like pulling money out of the bank, and I researched, banks I could hide the money at, that the Fed, this is dead serious, that the Fed would not regulate. And so I found banks there's 5 banks in the U.S. that are founded by Indian reservations that there's no authority over the Fed have no authority. Wow. One's in San Francisco. So I remember clearly taking $60,000 out of the bank, putting it in my suitcase and carry-on, and flying to San Francisco and opening an account and putting it in there in case I lost my lawsuit and had to go bankrupt.
Then you would have
so
60
I would
grand
at
to
least
start
have
with.
60G to start something with.
Right.
Well, at least
I did all of that. I did it. It was all wasted energy, wasted time. Deal with our reality and what we can control. And what we can control is actually taking the first step and tapping into that curiosity and realizing if you're not happy, try something new. Make a shift. It can be the smallest thing.
Well,
but that smallest shift can have the biggest impact.
Lots of guys, like military guys. I host a podcast or work with a podcast group that does a lot of military work, and a lot of the guys there, they say that, like, just even training new habits, start with something simple early on in the day. That's why all of them make their bed to the point where they can drop a quarter off of it, because that once that's done, first project's done for the day, move on to the next one, It kind of is like you start the day off with something completed and you can move on from there. And it sounds simple and hokey and cheesy, but it could be all you need to kind of get that forward momentum going. Is just make your bed in the morning,
No, it's actually 100%. Do you? You're not on my Instagram, but
No,
I'm like, are you watching me? Because
we'll follow you here.
This morning, no, because it's called. I don't know if you've read the book Eat the Frog. So Eat the Frog is a great book. It's a very, very easy read. It's not better than Chasing the High, but it's a great book. But it really, the whole premise of the book is doing the most challenging thing first thing in the morning and getting it over with. So I now wake up and run to the coffee shop, have my coffee, and run back.
There you go.
And so I've already gotten my run out of the way. So if I give myself excuses during the day of why I don't want to go to the gym, well, at least I've run a couple miles in the morning.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the bed, it's very similar with the bed. It's about getting something done early in the morning that you don't necessarily want to do, but then you've already gotten an accomplishment off and you already have some positive momentum going into the day.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's like something simple like doing the dishes, like putting it off. Now it's done. You feel good. It's out of your way. Move on to the next thing. It's 100%. Crazy. All right. Next for the Eggy Awards for 2019, our next category is writers, authors.
Yeah, so the writers category, again, this one was a little bit tricky. I mean, a lot of our guests have written books and done other things like that. And so this was a tough one because there are people who are in this list that just as easily could have been in the motivators list. And so it made our selection process really difficult because we were trying to find the best guys and the best categories and make sure that everybody had the best fit so that they were best represented. And, and so this was really a tough one. So, but I think everybody that's made this category is extraordinarily worthy, and I'm stoked to be sharing them with you.
Yeah.
So the nominees for the Eggy in the writers category for 2019 include
Mark E. Green.
Yep. Mark is a business coach, a executive leadership coach, a author. He and I had a lot of parallels in terms of type of content we talk about. We had some great discussions about the importance of relationships, things like that are near and dear to my heart. And yeah, just a great show, great guy, great everything. It was really good. Episode number 121. The second nominee in this category is
Adam DeColibus.
Yeah, Adam is the author of a book called Caravan.
And he actually reached out to us and was on a PR tour of his own to kind of
Yeah, so it's kind
promote
of
the book.
interesting with him.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and this is some of this is my impression, so I hope I'm not wrong, but my impression is he's a youngish guy. I don't know exactly how young, but pretty young. And, obviously self-publishing, he didn't have like a major publisher, a big distribution deal or whatever, but he reached out to us on his own to come on the show and sort of promote his book. And I think the thing that Mike and I enjoyed the most about it was his sort of, I guess, hustle. Like, we just really appreciated his hustle. Like, he was, going out, putting himself out there and trying to share his message, in this case by way of podcast. And I think we were, kind of taken back by that. Like, a lot of our guests come through agencies and through other things like that. And so, but we don't get that many people that are directly asking to come on the show. So it was really a cool thing for us. Really grateful to have had him on, and hopefully the book's going well.
Yeah, I think his book is loosely based off of another book called The Alchemist, because I think he referred to that during our interview, and I actually ended up listening to it on
that's Pablo Coelho.
Colho or something.
Yeah, we're such assholes. Like, we should know how to say that.
Right. Whatever.
Coelho? I don't know. It's a very, very
anyways,
famous book.
His book is based off of that, and so if you've read that book, it's kind of in that frame of mind.
Yeah, really cool. Check him out. Once again, that is Adam DeColibus.
Yes.
And he was episode 102. Third nominee in this category is Jason Troy. Jason is another one of these executive coaches, business coach types. He had authored a book and had come on the show to promote it. He was, an incredible interview, actually. We really enjoyed it. And it's funny, it's one of these first impressions things, right? Like, I remember when we received his bio, like, I can't remember what it said, but there were some words in there that made it sound like maybe he wasn't going to be all that exciting. Like, he was an executive coach or something. It sounded pretty stuffy and straightforward.
Yeah.
And
turned out to be one of the best interviews.
And
of the year.
he was an incredible guest, and really pleased to have had him on. And I think you guys will, hopefully the people who, hopefully you've listened to it, and if not, you ought to.
Yeah.
It's episode number 100. Which is a fun milestone anyway.
Right.
And yeah, so please go check out Jason Troy's article or episode.
Yep. And the winner of the writers category for the 2019 Eggies Award is, drumroll,
Mark E. Green.
As I was preparing for the podcast, I was thinking about different gifts of learning that I received over the course of my journey, my life. And
I like that you call them gifts.
Yeah, and there's 6 of them that I noted. And again, we don't have to get to all of them, but this was certainly one of them, this layoff. And the layoff gave me the gift of choosing how I react to events. Okay. So I was working for this technology company, managing their outsourced relationship with a bank in New York City at the time. And I was in over my head. And I didn't really admit it to anybody, but I knew it. And I knew I wasn't doing a great job. And so I became a relatively easy target for a layoff. So technically I was laid off, but I knew at the time that I was laid off because I was really weak in the role. And this is after, 10 years with this company, getting hired right off a college campus, going through this super high profile management training program and all of this kind of stuff. So it came as a real blow to me. And I made the decision very quickly that this layoff was going to be the best thing that ever happened to me. And I even went so far as to articulate that to my boss as we were having the conversation around, hey, you're not going to be here anymore, and here's the package, and here's what we're going to provide you with, and all that kind of stuff. And my parting words were, this may sound strange to you, and I can quote this because I remembered exactly. This was 20 years ago now. I said, this may sound strange to you, but I feel like you just gave me a bouquet of flowers and wished me well for the rest of my journey. Like I just feel like you gave me a gift.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love that.
And I chose in that moment, I just had this feeling that it was the right thing, even though I was really hurt. I mean, really hurt and upset. And at the time I had 2 young kids, and we have three now, but at the time I had two. And so again, it just was a big deal. So I went on from there, and that's where I started to gain experience in the small business world. And without getting into all the detail, I worked for a couple of different firms in marketing and sales and technology, and got a really good feel for small business, whereas this other company I had been working for was this giant company. And that all led me to launch my my coaching practice, right? So here's the part of the story that brings it all together. Last year, 2018, 20 years after I was laid off, I received an email from a client of mine. And just for listeners' perspective, I'm a growth coach. So I work with CEOs and their leadership teams running high growth mid-market firms. And to me, a mid-market firm is a company with somewhere between 25 and $400 million in revenue. So my clients run the range from, maybe 50 to 100 employees on the low end to well over 1,000 or multi-thousand employees on the high end. So
Wow.
Just for perspective
Sure.
as to
Yeah,
where I'm
that's
at
really
right
helpful.
now. So I get an email from one of my clients late last year, late 2018, and the email says, I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine who is interested in hiring a coach. And it was the CEO of the bank.
That you got
how
laid
funny.
off.
Now, it wasn't the same. It was the same bank. It wasn't the same CEO.
Oh,
So So 20 years later, essentially, I'll close it all out. I was hired to coach the CEO and the executive team of that bank.
That's coming full circle right there.
Yeah, it really is.
pretty
That's
cool.
awesome.
Okay, and so once a month, I'm in the boardroom with this team now as their coach, and I'm not telling the story to position myself in any highfalutin way here, but to close the circle around this concept of underscoring the importance of choosing how you react to something, and how that can play itself out literally over decades in ways that you just don't understand. And so that was my gift from the layoff early in my career.
It's interesting. We have sort of a friend of the show, this guy named Chris Doe, that is he's in the creative space, but he does a lot of coaching and things like that. And he has something similar to this where he basically says, anytime something goes sideways, you just say congratulations and then find the other side, so whatever it is. And so it's really cool that you sort of had the thought to do that, and so many people, and as I mentioned, being a layoff victim myself, when I went home, my wife was having a conniption fit, but my inclination was, no, we're going to be fine. Like I was, already working outside of work. Like, I mean, this now gives me the opportunity to build on what I've been working on, so for me, it ended up being a great opportunity, much like you're saying. And so, I had the temperament that's how I handled it, but had it just been my wife's layoff, I don't know how much she'd have gone that way. And so it is really interesting, just that idea, and maybe you can even speak to it a little bit. Like, what gave you that confidence? Why did you feel so good about it?
I've always been wired toward the optimistic, and I would say probably a little bit more externally than internally. In other words, I might not feel totally optimistic, but I would always put out that all was well, which by the way caused another issue that I wasn't always willing to ask for help when I needed it. And I learned that lesson along the way as well, right? But I was always wired that way. So I only knew one way to react to that event. And it was to categorize it as a great thing and then to move on. And it's actually one of the 8 activators in my book, Activators. And it's called Leverage Your Past. And it's this idea that events that happen to us, once the event has occurred, every memory that we have about an event is just a story we tell ourselves. That's it. It's a story. We make it up. I mean, it's true. And for proof of this, you got to find 2 people who took the same vacation at the same time, like a couple friend of yours who, let's say, went to, I don't know, Key West for a week of vacation or took a cruise together, and they come back from the trip and you sit down and you say, so how was the trip? And one person says, oh man, the trip was amazing. The weather was great. The service was fantastic. And the other person says, the food could have been better. And by the way, the ship wasn't that clean. And it was an okay vacation. They had the same experience.
Yeah, no, it's true.
We're
It's
together.
Yeah, it really is just all about perspective. And it is sort of that outlook, whichever you've got, whether it's positive or negative, it's sort of whatever outlook you bring to the table.
Exactly. So the extension of that concept is then if we acknowledge that a memory is essentially a story we tell ourselves, then guess what you can do with your memories? You can reframe them. You can discover new aspects about an event that happened in the past just by thinking about it that can cause you to reframe the memory. And it's a really powerful thing because a lot of times we act in the present because of how we remember events in the past, and it doesn't always serve us. And so by knowing this, you can actually go back and say, well, it's like I've been bitten before kind of memory.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go do this again. And yet it's the thing that you're not doing again that's probably holding you back from whatever you're pursuing. And you can actually go back and reframe the memory. And so I created a tool to do just that and help you leverage your past in a positive way instead of have it hold you back. And it's all just a matter of choice.
Yeah, no, it's so funny because like so many of us feel powerless when it comes to these kinds of things. We feel like that, somebody's will has been imposed on us or whatever, and that we're sort of out of control of the situation, when the reality is just what you're describing. It's being able to sort of, wrap your head around it, take it in, but then do with it as you wish or do with it as you ought to that, serves you best.
Yeah, and an extreme example of this is the college athlete, and there's many of them, so I won't name a name, but the college athlete who was traumatically injured and let's say wheelchair bound for the rest of their life in the sport. And this person goes around and they're the most radiant, happy person you've ever seen. And they look at their injury as like just a part of the gift of their life, right?
Yeah,
and
that's true.
If that's not a choice, you tell me what is, okay? And it's the exact same idea because there's going to be another person who has the same kind of an injury and it's effectively going to end their life. And that's their choice, right? But it's the same event. So this is a very powerful notion. And the way to start to unpack this in your mind is to slow yourself down and ask, what is it that was good that came from this event that I'm not thinking about right now? Let me just make a list of anything that was positive or good from this event. Or let me make a list of anything I learned as a result of this event that's made me a better person. Okay? And if you ask questions like that, you're going to come up with a list of things that's going to start to shift how you frame the memory from this horrible thing into like, wow, I guess, it was bad at the time, but these things came of it. And that's a really, really important
All right. Up
So
next,
we're back.
We're back.
This is the moment everyone's been waiting for.
Everyone.
Literally
on pins
everyone.
and needles.
Yep. I mean, I can't even tell you how many tweets and Instagram DMs and emails
Nonstop.
and
It's just
everything
driving me
else.
nuts.
But since last week when we announced the preview that we were going to talk about this best of show category, it's just been gangbusters. People knocking down the door. And you know what? They're right to be doing it because it is. It's really an exciting time. So people who, happen to listen to last year's Eggy Awards, we just had one winner in the Best of Show category last year.
It was Chris Doe.
Chris Doe of The Future and Blind out in Santa Monica. Great dude, great interview. Still one of our most downloaded episodes of all time. So go check it out. It's worth it. Lots of great knowledge dropped in that episode. This year, however, we're doing things a little bit differently. Both Mike and I agree on the winners of this category. However, we both felt like, for different reasons, that more than one person deserved to win it.
Yep.
And so both Mike and I chose our own winner in the Best of Show category. And so they're basically going to sort of wear the same hat, like together, like one of those weird hats with the bill in the front.
Essentially, I'm going to hit play on both clips and let them play out.
They're just going to play over top of one another.
I'll pan one to the left and one to the right.
So depending on which ear you cover, you can hear the episode. So, but anyway, so there's two guests. So I'll let Mike start. But basically, in this Best of Show category, what we did was sort of go back and look at our whole catalog for the year, 50 some episodes that we did in this in 2019. really, I mean, I can't even express how great our guests have been, how much the show has grown and improved. Like, what a year. And so I'm really anticipating next year. 2020 is going to be off the chain. But
Ballin'.
And so, but nonetheless, Mike and I have arrived at a couple best of show candidates, and I couldn't be happier to share it with them.
So my pick for this year is one of my favorite episodes, and I think just because of the conversation in general, I think he just opened up on a whole nother level, almost more than I think he does normally. Our conversation with Tommy Breedlove was amazing. Like, if you haven't heard that episode, it's episode 127, and just from start to finish, it's just great.
Yeah, no, Tommy was an amazing guest. He is another one of these, motivational type guys. His story is like heart-wrenching, like top of the top to bottom of the bottom, and then back to the middle kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
I mean, really
he went
incredible.
from the bottom of the bottom up to the top of the top, and then realized he wasn't like getting the most out of it, and then had to kind of change things again.
Yeah, but I don't know that I've ever heard such a great story of sort of a person taking control of their life in the middle and saying, you know what, this is how I'm going to do it now.
Yep.
And making such a dramatic change. He had kind of a big booming voice, and just the message he had to share, I think, was really profound and great.
Yeah.
So super pleased, even though he was Mike's pick, not mine. I think, I mean, if we had to narrow it down to one, Tommy's as good as anybody we had this year.
Yeah.
So congrats to Tommy for co-best of showing at this year's Aggies.
Yeah.
He was episode number 127. I strongly encourage you to go back and listen.
Definitely worth it.
You're going to get a clip here in just a few moments, but you're going to want to go back and hear the show, I promise. So congrats, Tommy Breedlove.
I was that guy who never dealt with any of those wounds and demons from his past. And so I just buried them. And I thought if I just outworked you, out hustled you, out whatever maneuvered you, that I always thought that success, power, prestige, fame, and money were going to bring me happiness. Cause that's what I thought the dream was, right? As soon as I get there and have those things, then I'm going to be a happy, good guy. And so you fast forward about 14, 15 years, I was that guy. I was the principal in the firm, had the shiny car, the cufflinks, the tailored suit, the corner office, literally a corner glass office on the top of a building in Atlanta, making a lot of money. And I was miserable.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I had become the bully again, but it was just a different type of bully. It wasn't using my hands as I did as a young man. It was using my intellect, my work, my drive. And I was just really, I was just wearing all these masks. I wasn't me. I was the tough guy, cool guy, important guy, I'll outwork you guy, but I was never really Tommy Breedlove. And so how that manifested with me is when I couldn't fill that hole with power, prestige, money, the next big conquest in business, I started reaching out to all the wrong things. And by 36 years old, there was 100 things not to do, brother. I'd probably checked off about 90 of them. And so, my marriage was crumbling. The armor was cracking, and I found myself yet another big moment. Here I am in the ditch in Atlanta looking at the blue sky. And probably a week before that, I was doing some $25 to $50 million mergers and acquisitions deal. And I'm like, how did I get here?
In the ditch looking into the sky, just wasted, passed out.
Yeah, totally. The next morning. Yep. Didn't know where a car was, didn't know where I was, looking at the sky and thinking, my God, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And so that was my aha moment. I was like, no more. Let's fix this.
I've had multiple stories similar to that, and I just don't learn. I've learned a little bit now, but I've been there. I've woken up to 4 police officers around me, like, "What are you doing? You wake up, buddy," or this or that, and it's kind of a sobering moment right there, realizing that you're, I can relate.
It's a tough moment too, and I don't know what it was at that moment, but that's when I'd had enough.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what this is. This just isn't working. And so I don't know if it was that little boy who had everything in the world happen to him. He just says, like, get up and you got to live for both of us, right? That little boy that was deep down inside me. I don't know what it was. But I said, it's enough. And that's where I began some people call it, we'll say it's sexy. It was a spiritual transformation. Some people call it rock bottom. Some people call it rock bottom. We'll use some sort of technically cool word. And I made my emotional, physical, spiritual, mental well-being my full-time job.
So what was
that's began me on this path. My first step, this is cool, man. My first step was my wife and I had been in and out of marriage counseling, clearly, because things weren't going well on that front. And one of the guys, it's two funny things. Well, one funny thing and then one serious thing. But one funny thing always happened when we went to marriage counselor. My wife's name's Heather, and they would about the third session, they'd say, Heather, you need to stay home. And Tommy, why don't you come back? And the first depth work with you. The first few times I was like, they're going to tell me she's the problem, and I'm like, oh, no. But they saw something like some deep pain and wounds that I couldn't see in myself. And, I had buried all that stuff. It's like it didn't happen. And one of those guys did the biggest favor for me. He goes, Tommy, I don't know what you're dealing with or why you're so closed and can't. I literally couldn't feel guys. And they go, there's a place in Tennessee that can do more for you in 7 days than I can do in 10 years. And I never forgot him saying that. And I literally had that voice in my head when I was looking at that blue sky that morning thinking, my God, how did I get here? I mean, I was a big, I was a big deal, in the financial world. But here I am, miserable, unhappy, lost, scared, and everything else. And so I went to that place in Tennessee, man. And I tell you, they cut me open and pulled me apart for 4 days. And what was cool, it was the first time in my life I thought that I was not alone. I thought I was alone in my demons, my insecurities, my fears, the not good enoughs, the critic, that voice in our head that tells us we're never going to be anything. And there was a rock star there was a CEO there, and there was a lot of normal Joes and girls just like me. And I realized we all have the same pain. And so that's my first step. And they spend 4 days cutting you apart and then 3 days putting you back together. And from there, I just drank from a personal development, self-mastery, mentors, coaches, masterminds, psychologists, you name it. I doubled down on it. And for the last 9 years, I've just made me my full-time job and investing myself. And that's how I turned it all around.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, I think, and it probably speaks a little bit to your character, being a guy in finance and everything, that you were a driven personality, and maybe, whatever your goal was, you were going to achieve, whether it was going to school and then working your way through school, whether it was, working your way up the chain at Deloitte, or whether it was, fixing yourself. It seems like you've got a very driven personality that probably lends itself to, once you recognize that a course correction is needed, that you can just jump on it and go. How would you, what would you say to somebody who maybe doesn't have that driver or is missing the piece that allows them to go so hard on something? So, because I think that, the experience you've had, I think as you discovered, at this place in Tennessee, it's not that uncommon. There's a lot of people going through these things, but I don't know that everybody has that little thing that you have. That's this ultra driven personality, this thing. And I mean, if it's rock stars and CEOs at this particular facility, maybe you guys have a lot of, things in common mentally. But for people who are maybe, I don't know, I don't like to say weak, but, people who are maybe a little softer or a little less capable of taking life by the horns, how would you help guide somebody down a path not unlike yours?
Well, you don't have to be driven and ambitious and I really embrace the ambition and drive. And that's a lot of the guys that work with me, a lot of guys that come see me to want to be better men, husbands, leaders, et cetera. Those are mostly ambitious, driven types to be better. But however, you don't have to have that. We all have on some level a deep, dark desire that we're not good enough. And on some level, we have a desire to be seen, heard, and loved. So it doesn't matter if you're an ambitious, driven alpha personality, or you're just, you're more of an introvert and calm. What I would say to that is every single thing in life is a choice. And what I mean by that is no one's going to come and save you, and there's no magic pill to this thing called life. Mm-hmm. And you've got to participate in your own rescue. And doesn't require ambition or drive, but it has to be a burning desire to master our mindset, to develop unconditional love for ourselves, and to step in and step up and to be the person we were born to be. And it's a choice. It's a tough choice. It takes a lot of courage to look in the mirror and say, I want to be better. And I'm not in the business of changing people. I'm in the purpose and pain business, but I'm not in the business of changing people. I'm just in the business of getting them to realize who they were born to be, because that's what I did for myself. But I would say to those people, I mean, you've got to step in and step up. And if you're not happy or unfulfilled, or you find yourself looking at the sky and asking, why am I here? Or you're not where you need to be financially or business in your career, the only person that you can blame is yourself. I mean, and so you've got to look in the mirror and you've got to make the hard decision. Am I going to take action? And a lot of us can take action. A lot of us can start a lot of things, but we never finish. But are you going to take action? Are you going to continue to take action? And are you going to it's just like going to the gym. So if we don't go to the gym, we're going to gain weight, our muscles are going to atrophy. We're just not going to be physically optimal. The same goes with our mental, emotional, and spiritual muscles. We've got to work them every single day, just like going to the gym. And you got to step in and step up to be the best person that you can possibly be. And I'm a big believer, guys, that you have to step in, invest in yourself first, and love yourself first before you can go invest in others and serve others the best you can be. And so that's what I would tell those people.
All right, and we're back. So Ryan,
as promised, here I am to tell you who my candidate or my nominee for the Best of Show winner was. And before I do, though, like, how awesome was that Tommy Breedlove clip?
It's
like,
great.
Tommy is the best, and I really, really appreciated that. So my Best of Show candidate is none other than Oscar Trimboli.
Yep, Oscar was another one of those interviews that just going into it, we were both on pins and needles because he's a listening expert.
Yeah, and I mean, you may not get this from listening to the Egg Show, but Mike and I barely listen most of the time. We're stepping all over each other at every opportunity. It's like, all we can do. And, so both of us, I think, because we knew Oscar was a listening expert, took sort of extra pause to make sure that we were on sort of best behavior for that day. Like, I don't think that I stepped on Mike even once. And like, I've already stepped on him like 10 times in this show. So like, I mean, it was pretty incredible. The type of interview we had with him, I think opened up kind of a door to a whole different category of stuff that I don't spend a lot of time thinking about, which is this idea of listening and deep listening. And, it's one of these characteristics that I think just about everyone could be better at and not enough people pay attention to. And so I think, his episode was particularly impactful to me for that reason. And just that, sort of opened up my brain into a whole nother realm. Also, like I said, and it sounds stupid to even say it, but like, I listened better in that episode than I had listened, in maybe any other episode, in almost any other thing ever.
Well, because you were on pins and needles.
Yeah, because I was acutely aware that this guy was a listening expert, and I didn't want to be judged. And so I spent a lot of, or paid a lot of extra attention. And I think as a result, the show was better. Like, I mean, the questions were more on point. The discussion was sharper and better.
There was some awkward silence, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, but we were supposed to. The listening expert said to be awkwardly silent. So we did what we were told, and it was amazing.
All right.
So nonetheless, Oscar was great. He has a book out called Deep Listening. It's awesome. It's basically this deck of cards. He sent us a copy. I stole it, and I've not given it back. But it is very cool, and I'm really grateful for Oscar coming on. He called in all the way from Australia. And it was a lot of fun to have him on the show. So my best of show winner is Oscar Trimboli.
Well, so maybe that's a good place to start then. Maybe we should, here in the Deep Listening book or in this deck of cards, one of the things you start with is sort of identifying these 5 levels of listening. Do you mind explaining that idea or sort of what these different 5 levels are? I think that'll sort of give us some context to frame the rest of this conversation.
Yeah, the 5 levels of listening are: the first level is not listening to the speaker. That's the wrong place to start. Level 1, listen to yourself. That's the most critical place to start. Level 2, listening to the content. Level 3, listening for the context. Level 4, listening for what's unsaid. And then level 5, listening for meaning. So we can spend a bit of time decomposing those. But the research that we've done with 1,410 listeners across the world is 86% of people are stuck in distraction. They're stuck with their cell phone. They're stuck with laptops, iPads, all kinds of visual distractions that are external, as well as mental distractions, stories we're telling ourselves in our head. We're turning up to a conversation tuned into the radio station of the last conversation or the next conversation or something we want to do on the weekend, but we're not really tuned into the person who's right there in front of us in the moment. So for a lot of us, we're stuck at level 1 because we're stuck with distraction.
Yeah. How do you kind of overcome that? I mean, you said it's level 1 for a reason. Why is it the most important one?
Yeah, good point, Mike. They're foundational. You got to kind of get good at level 1 before you can even have the capacity to start looking at level 2. So let's think about 3 practical tips to overcome this distraction. Tip number 1, think about this as a spectrum. Switch your cell phone off. Now, for a lot of us hearing that, we're just going, I can't go cold turkey like that. It's like, I'm going to have to put me in rehab. Yeah. So just switch off the red dots on all your apps. Make sure your apps aren't notifying you at all. If you can do that, that's a great starting point. If you want to move a little bit further forward from that, just switch the phone into silent mode. If you want to move a little bit forward from that, switch the phone to flight mode. And then finally, switch the phone off. One of the biggest gifts you can give people is to give them your attention. About 2012, a visiting exec from Microsoft Seattle flew to Australia, about a 24-hour flight. And I was hosting Peter in a room full of 20 executives from other companies. And he was an important person. He ran a business with about 30,000 staff members. And he was responsible for billions of dollars of revenue. And I introduced him, and he sat at the head position at the table. And he sat down, and immediately he stood up. And I thought, oh, no, I've done something wrong in the brief. But that wasn't the case. He stood up and apologized to the room. He says, look, the most important thing I can give you right now is my attention. And with that, he took his cell phone out of his top pocket, switched it off, walked over to his bag, placed it in his bag. And for the next 45 minutes, he was completely fixated on the conversation going on. Mike, I'm curious, what do you think happened for the rest of the room when Peter did that?
They probably paid better attention themselves. They probably pulled out their phones and switched them into silent mode, and it kind of was a way to open the conversation and get it started.
Well, except for that one guy in the back left who was watching his fantasy scores. Yeah, that guy. But he's a problem in every meeting, that guy.
Yeah, so I counted, and only 3 people didn't switch their cell phones off. So you're right about those problem children in the room. They're addicted to how important they are. Now, none of them ran a business as big as Peter, so it's an interesting thing to notice. 2 things struck me in that conversation. Number one, the quality of the conversation that was taking place was very different to a typical meeting that these executives kind of take. The reason they were is because they were actually listening to each other. But the other point is really simple. Every one of us can role model great listening by paying attention to somebody. Now, it won't surprise you that what Peter did in that moment was a completely orchestrated piece of theatre. He does that at every meeting. Now, he doesn't do it to be a big shot. He does it to role model to everybody that giving attention, not paying attention, but giving attention is the greatest gift you can give. The meeting concluded at the 45-minute mark, and Peter left to go to another meeting. And I debriefed the group for the next half an hour. And the thing that struck me was all of them commented on the quality of the conversation. Now, that group, 7 years later, still meets in some combination of people, sometimes only 6, sometimes up to 12. And they're all in different roles. They're all in different organizations, but they call the Peter Club. A group of people that get together, that switch off their cell phones and pay attention to each other and make a difference. For a lot of us, whether we're parents, whether we're a sibling talking to maybe a cousin, maybe a sister, maybe a brother, do we really give them our attention, or we just completely distracted? So tip number one, switch it off. The same with laptops, the same with iPads. Tip number two, a hydrated brain is a listening brain. The brain is 5% of body mass, but it consumes 26% of blood sugar. So the fastest way to get blood sugar to the brain is just to drink water.
Does beer work?
It does.
Has a reverse
It does. It
Sorry,
lubricates
I'm
the
that guy.
conversation really well.
Yeah.
And if you drink coffee, probably a glass of water for every cup of coffee you have plus one. So for me, I always make sure there's water there for my guests if I go and visit a client. And it makes a point that at the end of the day, and because none of us have been taught how to listen, it's a really complex task. It happens at the front of the brain, the more modern brain, the prefrontal cortex. And for a lot of people, when they start off on the journey with me, they go, gee, this listening is hard. And I say, you're doing it the wrong way. And the third point is breathing. The deeper you breathe, the deeper you listen. Most of us aren't even aware of our breathing. We're not even aware of the breathing of the person we're listening to. So, Mike, for your question, 3 things to improve and build a foundation to be a deep listener. Number 1, remove the distractions. Number 2, drink water. Number 3, notice your breathing. And for me, it's just a simple practice. When I step into a building, the minute I cross the lobby, my phone goes off, it goes in my bag. From the time I walk across the lobby into the lift, what I do from that point on, I just take 3 deep breaths. Now, about 4 weeks ago, my ears popped because I went to a high-rise building, 42 stories, and my ears popped about halfway, which completely threw me. So rather than turning left to go to reception, I turned right and went to the restrooms, just collected my thoughts, 3 deep breaths, back at it. And then when I arrived at reception, they offered me refreshments. I said, look, I'd love a jug of water for me and the people we're seeing. And that's as simple as it is. But if you've got those 3 foundations in place, listening becomes really easy after that. But for most of us, that's where we'll struggle.
Interesting.
Well, so there's a couple things you brought up in there that I'd like to dig in a little bit more on. You know, I'd like to talk a little more about breath, especially. Also, I've got a couple questions about removing distractions. But one of the things you mentioned a couple times in there was the quality of the conversation that you had with Peter, and how people remarked about just the quality, not, you know, what he talked about, not how long it was, whatever, but like the actual quality of that conversation. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and talk about sort of like, you know, what metrics by which do we measure quality of conversation? Like, how do we know that this was good quality? Can you maybe elaborate on that idea a little?
The most typical one that people notice the fastest is the lack of interruption, allowing people to fully complete what they're saying, rather than jumping in and thinking what they said the first time is what matters. It's a really important bit of neuroscience we need to know at this point. I speak at about 125 words a minute. A cattle auctioneer might speak at about 200 words a minute as they're auctioning off the cattle at the cattle yards, but we can still comprehend at 200 words a minute. In my head, though, and for all of us, we have about 900 words a minute stuck in our head. So the first thing that comes out of our mouth, there's about an 11% chance that the first thing I say is what I mean. So the minute you interrupt somebody, you actually assault their thinking. You don't let them fully express what they say. So the most common thing people correlate to high quality conversations is the lack of interruption. In the West, we have a weird relationship with silence. In the East, silence is revered. It's respected. It's a sign of authority. It's a sign of wisdom. Yet in the West, we say awkward silence, pregnant pause. We have a weird kind of relationship with silence. So the second part of a high quality conversation is just letting silence sit in the room to do a bit of work. The third part of the conversation about high quality conversations is the backstory is fully explained. For those of you who ever take briefs, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're in agency land, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a market researcher or an architect, the biggest reason your briefs blow up if you win the work is because you don't fully understand the backstory. And for a lot of us, we spend too much time listening to what people are saying in the moment rather than understanding the context of where that comes from. So a couple of simple questions might be, how long have you been thinking about this issue? That's a really good sign, Ryan, of a high quality question. Now, questions that are high quality typically are 5 to 7 words, no more, because after that, the question becomes a statement, really. You're just voicing your opinion and you're putting a question mark at the end of it. So number 1, no interruptions. Number 2, silence is used a lot more. And number 3, high quality questions that are less than 5 words that are seeking to explore what other 800 words the speaker still hasn't said. Now, there are some magic code words, but we'll talk about that in a sec when we know the speakers explain what they mean.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think what you were talking to, if I've got it right, is basically you've got this thing in the book called the 125/400 rule. And is that basically that's this ratio of number of words we can communicate versus number of words in our head, if I've got it correct?
So there's two rules. The 125/400 rule, I can speak at 125 words a minute. You can listen at 400 words a minute, and I can think at 900 words a minute. So there's 2 kind of simultaneous mathematical equations going on. That's why listening is hard. So Ryan, to the point, I speak at 125 words a minute. You listen at 400 words a minute. And for those who are listening to this right now, you're getting distracted because I'm speaking too slowly for you, and you might be commuting, you might be in a car, you might be on a plane, you might be on a train. But right now you're filling in the gaps because I'm not speaking fast enough. And that's the internal element of distraction. You're filling in 300 words in your own head because you can listen faster than I can speak. If you ever want to do this test, simply play this recording back at 2 times speed and you'll be able to listen to it with near perfect comprehension. Once you start to move to 300, you're at the edge without training. So, Ryan, in that moment, we got to know that we will be distracted. And I'm not a perfect listener. I want to be clear about that. The difference between you and me is I just notice when I get distracted faster than you do.
Is it because you're attentive to that, or is it because I'll listen to audiobooks and sometimes I'll miss a whole chapter and have to go back and listen to it again before my brain clicks on and says, hey, you weren't paying attention to that?
Yeah. And one of the funniest stories I ever heard was a lady called Claire was commuting to work and sent me a message after she heard me on a podcast going, Oscar, the minute you said it's happening to you right now, I realized in that moment it was happening to me right now. And Ding. Mike, she did exactly what you did. She pressed rewind and went back. So for a lot of us, just becoming conscious of the fact we're being distracted is an interesting practice for us to get better at. And because we have no training, because we've never been taught what good listening looks like, we can drift through a whole chapter in an Audible book. And you may even be playing it at 1.5 times speed because you want to get it through it quicker. So for me, if you're listening at 5 levels, rather than listening to sentences, stories, you have to listen differently. So for me, when I'm listening to people, I'm going, do they consistently talk in the past or the future? Are they consistently talking about positives or negatives? Are they consistently talking about themselves or their team? So once you start listening at all 5 levels simultaneously, you can't help but be fascinated. You can't help but be engaged. Here's a little working definition for you, though. The difference between hearing and listening is your willingness to have your mind changed. And if you're willing to have your mind change, you listen completely differently. You listen for differences and similarities. You go into the conversation with a heightened sense of curiosity, and your head's just exploding, going, this is the most fascinating conversation I've ever heard. Now, for most of us, that's not true, because we make up a story that's a filter in front of the conversation. Oh, well, here we go with Mike again on that thing. And I'm not listening to Mike. I'm listening to the radio station frequency I've created in my own head that's blocking me being able to listen effectively to Mike.
All right, guys. Well, that's it, man. That is the 2019 Eggies.
Yeah.
It's the end of an era. But don't worry, the era starts, or the next era starts like next Thursday. So so don't panic. Like, I mean, it's not the end of like a serious era. It's just the end of 19. But, you know, I just want to say, you know, sort of hats off to everybody who contributes to this show as a guest and as a listener. You know, basically there's no point in doing the show if nobody's listening to it. And we have been honored to just have some amazing guests, you know, over the course of the show, but also this year specifically. We had a lot of really great guests on. No, you know, anybody who wasn't included on this list just as well could have been.
Yeah. Every interview we did this year was awesome.
Yeah, it was really difficult to make the cut because we had so many great people from so many different walks of life this year. So big shout out, a big thank you to all our guests, everybody who's been kind enough to come on and share their stories. Also to the listeners, everybody who is, you know, who's been a part of our show, those who write in, those who don't. And probably should more often, but everybody who takes any part of the show and, you know, shares and subscribes and tells their mom and all the things that we sort of ask for over the course of the year. You know, this whole thing's kind of for you. You know, I mean, the idea is that we're sharing the knowledge of people you might not otherwise have access to, in hopes of, you know, maybe making a positive impact on your life.
You know, you can say it's for them, but I'm going to be greedy and say it's 100% for me.
Hey, we're people too. I mean, you know, not to keep beating the Oscar Trimboli drum, but I mean, you know, a big part of why that was my best of show was because of the impact it had on me.
Right.
But you know what? If it had that kind of impact on me, then why wouldn't it have had that impact on a lot of our listeners and been, you know, assuming they were listening.
Yeah, and, that's right.
So I mean, just, you know, huge shout out, lots of love and everything to everybody who kind of keeps this show going, because me and Mike have a lot of fun doing it, but it's, you know, because of you guys that we're able to do it.
Yep. So
yeah.
Happy New Year, and we'll catch you in 2020.
Yeah, we'll be back in 2020. So I heard last night I was on the Peloton.
No.
And my instructor.
Did you get it for your wife?
No, I got it for me. God, I wouldn't dare buy it for my wife. God, who would do such a thing? I got on it. My instructor, Jess King, was telling everybody, you know, all the motivational crap that she's normally spewing and that I thoroughly enjoy. But she said something that I thought was kind of interesting about sort of the end of years. You know, we joked that this was the end of an era, you know, meaning the end of this year. But, you know, she said something to the effect of, you know, you're like, just because it's another day doesn't mean it's, you know, like, you don't need to wait until 2020 to kick off your new year.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Every day
you don't
is your
need the
new
starting
year.
point.
And so, so don't wait. Like, don't hold off doing the things you want to do because of you're waiting for, you know, a milestone like 2020.
I will say that you get the better gym deals if you wait.
Well, that's true. So, yeah, all right, never mind. Ignore all that and just get back to the gym in 2020.
And then go once and never use it again.
So, and that message is for men and women alike of all fitness levels, not to be confused with Peloton. So, and that is our pop culture moment for the year. So cool,
Refer
everybody.
to our previous episode if you have any questions.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, everybody, thanks so much for participating in the show. We'd love to see a lot more of you next year. You know, big plans ahead. So we'll see you in 2020. Everybody have a safe holiday, and